Hey, this is Dan from Stryker, and you're watching Richard Metal Fan.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Richard Metal Fan Interviews. This is episode number 103. And today's guest, we're talking to Dan Cleary. Dan Cleary is the lead vocalist for the band Stryker, a kind of a heavy power metal band from Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. Today we're going to be talking to him basically about the history of the band and much, much more. So without further ado, let's go talk to Dan. So what's up, guys? I am here with Dan from the almighty Stryker. How you doing today, Dan?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing pretty well. I'm glad we're finally be able to make this happen because I've been wanting to try to do. I was supposed to do this in person back in April. You're going to do that tour with Beast and Black. I was going to do it. We're going to do it in Atlanta, but then of course the whole Atlanta show got canceled because the singer got COVID.
Yeah, that was brutal.
Yeah, but here we are. Here we are, like about 8 months later. Now we finally get to do this.
Yeah, I'm stoked, man.
Awesome. So basically the format is I want to do pretty much a rundown of the Stryker catalog as well as like your journey as an artist from where you started to now. But I want to dive right back into the very beginnings before that. And I always ask all my interviewees this, like, what were the first bands that got you into metal? What made you want to be a vocalist?
I'd probably say Iron Maiden was a big one. I was super into classic rock. Like that was sort of my like segue into metal was like when I was in junior high and high school. Like I was really into like Boston and just a lot of like classic rock kind of stuff, like Jimi Hendrix and stuff like that. And then yeah, eventually that kind of just morphed into uh Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Metallica, Megadeth. Those are all huge. Like the sort of classic ones.
All right. All right. And were you in any bands before starting up Stryker, or was Stryker your first band?
Yeah, I was in a band with like a bunch of the members of Stryker before Stryker, which was called Vinyl Spine. And there's some old videos of that on YouTube. I think if you can dig down that hole and see, there might be some.
All right. And how did you get to know the guys in the band? Because I believe Stryker formed in 2007.
Yeah, the original lineup, most of us knew each other from high school, and then Chris was in music college with our original guitar player Ian, so that's how they kind of got together. And then, so yeah, we've most of us have known each other for a long time, like even since we were sort of junior high and high school.
Oh yeah, and it's hard to believe that this year is also 15 years of Stryker as a band. Is it crazy to think that you guys have now been around for 15 years?
Yeah, it's nuts. It's still fun though. I mean, like we've had a lot of lineup changes, and it kind of goes to show just like it's pretty difficult to be a musician in general, especially when you're like, if you want to do anything else with your life, it's sort of a lot of things take a back seat. So we've had a lot of different members over the years, but our current lineup is really stoked. So
Yeah,
still going.
yeah, I gotta find the members who are dedicated for the cause.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, it's not the easiest thing in the world because it's not like we're no Metallica. We're not making millions of dollars or anything like that.
Yeah. So then tell me about, like, as from what I saw in Mel Archives, you had a demo from 2008 which was pretty much like demo versions of songs from the first EP.
Oh yeah. It does exist somewhere. It was funny because like the uh the thing that sort of kickstarted the band for us was a friend of ours, Clayton, took our EP that we had just like recorded ourselves, and I don't even know if I would call it an EP. It was just like 3 or 4 songs that we recorded by ourselves because we were just having fun. And he took it with him to some festivals in Europe and started showing people who are like into like underground metal. And we got an offer from like a small record label over there that wanted to put it out, and that was Iron Codex, who put out Eyes in the Night originally. Um, So yeah, that's I don't know. Anyways, that EP, I couldn't tell you where it is if you could even find it, but
Yeah. Yeah, but how did Iron Codex find Stryker?
just like that, like it was our buddy had like an MP3 player and actually like gave headphones to people at a festival and was like, "Hey, check this out if you like underground metal." And I think one of them either worked for them or was like just knew them and then just sent the files to them or something like that. But yeah, it was just like word of mouth.
Yeah, and I think the Road Warrior EP is a great EP. But it has almost kind of like a very catchy kind of like party vibe, especially one of my favorite songs is "The Keg That Crushed New York." Or what's
Oh yeah,
about that song?
yeah. It's just like I don't know us. We've always done kind of. We haven't been that serious with our lyrical content usually. Like I mean, the occasional song will be a little more serious, but um, yeah, that song was just like we were like, what if Godzilla was a keg and it was destroying New York, and then we just wrote a song about that. So I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, yeah, but then of course, moving on to 2010, you released the debut full-length album, Eyes in the Night. What was the thought process making the debut full-length Stryker album?
I think we were just doing our thing, just writing music that we liked and having fun, and just we didn't have like much of an agenda or anything like that. We were just kind of like, hey, let's do an album that we think is cool with like kind of the influences that we were that we had at the time. It was a lot of sort of like underground metal and speed metal and that stuff, classic heavy metal stuff. So um, yeah, it just sort of came naturally, and we just had a good time.
Yeah, and I think it's a really great album, and I think and I think in my opinion, I feel like you're one of the best singers, especially in like the whole new wave, and you have like really powerful high notes, and you have like just a really amazing voice on this album.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
And then moving into the next album, Armed to the Teeth, because usually with the debut album, you have like your entire life to write, right? And there's like a lot of hype that builds up with the debut. When it came to making Armed to the Teeth, did you feel like pressure to follow up Eyes in the Night?
I don't know. I don't know if we ever felt like real pressure. I think we were more just excited to do more and write more songs and just try different stuff. Um, it was it was an interesting experience recording that album because we went down to Nashville and worked with Michael Wagner, who did like he mixed like Master of Puppets and he did Skid Row and stuff like that. So we weren't sure what to expect. And when we came down there, we had sent him the song "Fight for Your Life" first, and he was like, "Oh, this is sick! Like let's do this record." And then we came down with a bunch of like faster, heavier songs, and he was like, "Oh, okay." Like he sort of thought the whole album was going to be like mid tempo, sort of like classic metal and rock, but we had a lot more like speedy double kick stuff than he was expecting, I think.
Right. And I know, and you know, it was also the first album on Napalm Records. How did they find Stryker?
Um, I don't even know if I really remember how that came about. We might have been just sort of shopping the album because we had done the recording first, so we had the album done, and then like we just self financed it, which was fucking expensive. I don't recommend it,
Yeah.
but um, because we spent like 6 weeks down in Nashville recording, and it was just like, man, that was expensive to stay down there and record. But um, so, anyways, I think we just were shopping it around, trying to find a label who might want to release it, and then if we didn't find one, we could just do it ourselves. But um, at the time, Napalm gave us an offer, and we were like stoked to work with them. So yeah.
Yeah. And I know that this year is also the 10-year anniversary of it. So how do you feel about the album now, 10 years later?
It's great. It's funny. Like honestly, I don't listen to like our our own music very much at all. Really, like I think it's funny because I always like the analogy I make is like if you wrote like a short story when you were in high school and then 10 years later you read it, you'd probably be like, what the fuck is this? Like, you know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
always fun because it's like, but it's a weird thing. It's like something that you did little, like a project that you did like 10 years ago. And then you look at it now, it's like obviously you see it through a different lens or whatever, but I still really like it. And it was a really fun experience. Just
Yeah.
it was so new on so many levels for us, like working with a bigger label and um working with a producer, like a bigger producer and stuff like that. So um it's fun. We've sort of gotten away from playing some of those songs in our live set. I think we'll probably put some more in because I there's a few songs that I miss playing.
All right. All right. And since you got signed to a little bigger label, did you start like touring outside of Canada?
Uh yeah, I think we did get to Europe on Eyes in the Night. We did like a a tour with Cauldron, and then we did so a few festivals and stuff like that. But yeah, with Napalm, we did eventually get some touring opportunities stuff. But it's like it's funny because like working with the label is like no guarantee. I think when we first signed with them, we were thinking like, okay, they're just gonna do all the stuff for us. They're gonna book us big tours and all this stuff, and then we didn't realize it's like, oh, you need a booking agent and you need a label and you need you know, a management person and like all this stuff. So it's sort of like um it was easy for us to like not quite get uh, the entire picture, and so we did eventually get some touring, but it took us a while to figure it out.
Right. Right. Did you tour America for the first time, or was that still a little later?
We toured America really late. I can't remember when we first went. um Jeez, I have a bad memory for this stuff, so I'm not sure.
No, you're
But I
good.
would have been around that time because we did have some like lineup changes right after that album came out. Ian, the original guitar player, ended up leaving after that album, but he ended up moving. So, um, but yeah, it was. I can't remember exactly when we got into the States. It was weird. It's expensive for us to tour the States because you need to get a visa, which costs money. Whereas going to Europe, it's expensive in terms of you have to book flights, but um, when it comes to like visas and stuff, there is none of that stuff. So you can just go play.
Yeah. And then moving on to the next album, City of Gold. I like this album. I feel on this album you incorporate a lot more of a heavier and thrashier kind of album.
Yeah, that's I don't know. It's funny. I think we kind of like flip flop. Like um some albums are like heavier and then some are a little lean a little bit more towards like classic metal and like, even like hair metal and stuff like that. So um but yeah, that was a really fun one, and it's always interesting to see who likes what, because some people really like certain albums, like Play to Win, the new one.
Yeah.
Some people really like that and don't so much like the heavier stuff, and then for some people it's the opposite. So
Yeah. And then there's the fans that
we
like
like it all.
everything.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love how on this album you actually did a cover of 2 Minutes to Midnight by Iron Maiden. Man, what made you guys decide to cover that song in particular?
I think we just wanted to cover a Maiden song, and then we were just like, shit, what's a sick Maiden song? And then someone was like, well, let's do 2 Minutes to Midnight. And we're like, okay, let's
Yeah.
do it. I think
Yeah,
that one turned out really well too.
yeah, it's still definitely one of my favorite Maiden songs.
Yeah, it's a classic.
Anyway, moving on to Stand in the Fire. Another great album from you guys. What was that whole recording process like for that album?
Well, that was an interesting one because the band had kind of like it kind of dissolved into, it was almost just like mostly Tim and I. Um, we Chris had left the band at that point, and then Adam, I believe Adam was touring with Cobra and the Lotus, and so it was just Tim and I kind of left to uh, do the writing for the most part, and also our bass player Billy at the time. And yeah, so that was an interesting one. We were just kind of just working on it, and it was almost a bit of like a reboot for the band because it was our first album after working with Napalm. So we just decided to do an independent release because we figured we could probably figure out how to do it all ourselves. And then yeah, it was like lots of fun. That was our first big like independent album that we did. So
yeah. And I think it just the album itself is great. I love how the opening track Phoenix Lights, just great job, just like getting this album off the ground from the get-go with like very fun verses and the catchy choruses.
yeah, it's a great album. I really like that one, and a lot of people are I think it's a good, like, you know, if people wanted to know what Striker was about, that's sort of a good album to sort of, it's got a little bit of everything. So
Yeah, and I love how you had like a saxophone on Out for Blood. How did you end up getting a saxophone on there?
We just knew a guy who could do it. Like, we had an idea for it because the song itself is like Out for Blood is like about like a, you know, 80s cop movies kind of thing, where it's and that's such a classic motif of those old 80s movies, is there's always like it's like steam rising from a sewer in in an alley somewhere, and then a saxophone playing. So we're like, shit, we should put a saxophone in the song. And then we just had him come over and do it like in our like little home studio, and he just ripped. So it turned out really well. A saxophone works really well in metal, I think.
Yeah, I think you did this even before Rivers of Nile.
Yeah, take that.
Yeah,
the originals.
yeah. And then going into the next album, which is self-titled, the first time it was like a quick turnaround. Did you start writing for the self-titled right after Stand in the Fire was released?
Yeah, it was pretty quick after that. We were like, let's do another one. In hindsight, we probably could have waited a little longer. And then some of those songs were sort of like songs that we maybe were working on for Stand in the Fire, and then it didn't quite get finished. And then so we had lots of material, so we just went with it. But it is like, it's a bit of a shorter album.
Yeah, and I'm always curious because usually the self-titled, when a band does a self-titled album, it's usually like the first album, or sometimes last. And sometimes I'm always curious if it's when it's like in the middle of like the catalog. I always think it's like a new start or a new beginning for a band in a way. Did you feel like that? That I was always curious why it was a self-titled.
To be honest, man, I have no idea. We were just maybe we didn't have a good idea for it or something. I don't know. I can't think of why. I don't know if there was a real reason other than we were just like, bands have self-titled albums, so we could do that too. I don't know.
All right, and then moving on to your latest album, "Play to Win." When it's a really good album. Well, and I remember from Stand and Fire, self-titled, and "Play to Win," it was just like an album year after year after year. Did you felt like you just had like the creative juices just flowing all over, so you just like just spitting out albums?
Yeah, I mean, it's never been like hard for us to write material. Like, I think it's probably because that's maybe the part of being in a band that I really like the most is writing. And I think it's just, you know, even when we don't have anything going on, I tend to be writing just because it's like a hobby of mine that I like doing. So we sort of never have like any shortage of songs and ideas and stuff like that. But the hard part is finding which ones are actually good and then kind of making them into a full song and stuff. But yeah, so we've always had lots to work with.
Yeah, and I heard this album was also won like an award or something.
Yeah, this one won. Oh, here, hang on, I got it here.
Oh yeah. Ooh, wow! You actually have this. Wow.
I got it on my desk. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like yeah, it's I believe it's the Juno Awards, which is basically like the Canadian Grammys.
Yeah, totally. It's Yeah, pretty much exactly like that. I mean, it's in scale, obviously not quite a Grammy, but in Canada, it's a really big honor. So we were really stoked about that. That was in 2020, and I think we put out the album in like really late in 2018. So it was like the way they work like the eligibility for albums is like it spills over a little bit. So it's like from late 2018 to early 2020 is sort of all in the same category or something like that. So I don't know how exactly it works, but we got in there for that album, and yeah, we were super stoked. The only bummer thing was it was COVID and we couldn't go to the actual like award show, which would have been sick.
Yeah. And being as it has been 4 years since Play to Win, have you started working on the next Striker album?
Yeah, actually, we're going into the studio at the end of February to start recording. So it's on the way. We got some. We're still working on the material and stuff. We're still trying to figure all it, piece everything together as best we can. And then we're going in to work with a producer, which I don't think we've actually announced yet, but we will shortly. And we're pretty excited. It's going to be interesting. But I think it's going to be really cool album. We have a lot of material. It's almost like another debut album. It's been so long because like the last album came out in 2018, and then we just put out a few singles during COVID, and then we've got like tons of material to go through, and I think it's going to be a good one.
Awesome. So will it be kind of almost like in the vein of Play to Win, or do you think it's going to stand out a little?
It's hard to say because there's definitely going to be some like heavier songs. I think there's a little bit of like the City of Gold vibe in some of the stuff, and then there's a little bit more adventurous stuff. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. I think it's definitely gonna sound like a Striker album for sure. But we're gonna try a few things.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to it. Like Striker's like definitely one of my favorite bands.
Nice.
Nice. And also a little bit about the future. What's also next for Striker? Have you all got like tours coming up?
We've got some festivals in the summer, but right now we're sort of just trying to figure out like we're gonna record the album, and then we got to figure out how we want to release it. We're talking to some labels and stuff, and we'll see. So we might do an independent release. We might work with a label. That's gonna really depend on the timeline and stuff like that, because record labels have a different, as an independent band, it's really easy for us to just do anything we want, right? Like if we want to release the album right after it's recorded, we could do that. But record labels are a little different, so we'll see. But yeah, so festivals in the summer, hopefully more touring after that, and then new album should be out pretty quick.
That's awesome, and thank you for this conversation, Dan. It's just great to talk to you. It's just any final words you want to say to close this out?
We've got a podcast. If people are into podcasts, we don't talk about anything in particular. It's just the band hanging out and rambling about stuff. So it's called The Band Chat with Striker. You can check it out. It's on all of our social medias and stuff like that. So, and then new album coming out this year, or next year, I guess, 2023.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. So everybody, Dan from Striker, see you next time.